everybody, and welcome once more to Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. Once more with the one and only Cave Cat. All throughout the series, I've interviewed quite a lot of TV shows and movies, but this is actually a first for the entire series. The show that I'm about to review is a little bit different, because it didn't really start out as a TV show at first, but rather as a radio show. And it's also not exactly a TV show either, but rather a direct-to-video series, similar to what VeggieTales was. I think you all know what I'm talking about. Yes, it's Adventures in Odyssey. To start things off, Adventures in Odyssey first started off as a radio series created by Focus on the Family back in 1982, though it didn't go by the current title back then, ending up having to go through several titles, which were Family Portraits in 1987, before changing the title to Odyssey USA the same year, until finally changing the title one last time to Adventures in Odyssey a year later in 1988. But now that that's over, to give the summary of the show as a whole, it stars a whole slew of characters living in the fictional U.S. town of Odyssey, as the title suggests, all while also learning various lessons from the Bible. Yes, you heard me right. This is the fourth time that I'm reviewing a Christian series, since the series was created by Focus on the Family, as I mentioned earlier. Anyway, the main characters of the series are John Avery Whitaker, or Whit for short, the wise and friendly proprietor of an ice cream parlor known as Whit's End, his friend and assistant Eugene Meltzner, a bespectacled young man who always assists Whit, not just in running the ice cream shop, but also in doing various experiments and making various inventions, and Connie Kendall, a teenager who often helps out around Whit's End. As mentioned before, Adventures in Odyssey is a Christian series, since it often focuses on various kids going through various problems that a lot of people can relate to, such as facing your fears, telling the truth, helping others, honoring your friends and family, doing the right thing, and several others. But while the radio series focuses on Whit and his friends helping a different kid in each episode, the direct-to-video series actually introduces us to the main child character, Dylan Taylor, a young boy who ends up meeting Mr. Whitaker in the very first episode after saving Whit's dog, Sherman, another new character added in the video series, from an untimely end. And aside from Dylan, there's also his family, consisting of his younger sister Jessie and his parents, whom I thought were also pretty neat characters as well. Also, fun fact for you, Dylan's father was actually voiced by Phil Lawler, who was one of the writers for the radio series. In fact, speaking of voices, another thing I should talk about regarding both the radio series and the video series is that they actually got quite a camaraderie of voice actors to provide the voices of the characters for the series, such as the late Hal Smith as Whit, the late Will Ryan as Eugene, Katie Lee as Connie, and many, many other voice actors and actresses. Though granted, Dylan did end up going through several different child actors, as is accustomed to when a child actor starts growing up and going through puberty. But even in spite of this, the child actors that the staff got to voice Dylan actually did a pretty good job, especially since one of them was actually the same kid that played Timmy Timmons in 1993's The Sandlot. Now, I want to make one thing really clear about the series. I didn't really listen to the radio series as often as I watched the video series, mainly listening to it from audio tapes that my mom would borrow from the church we used to go to, even if we also borrowed VHS tapes of the video series from the same church as well. Also, one thing I did find out about the video series is that it's actually a little bit different from that of the radio series that it originated from. I mean, yes, the video series still focuses on Dylan having to learn different lessons from the Bible, much like the other kids would do in the radio series, but being that this is an animated series, sometimes it's expected that the video series would do things slightly different from that of the radio series. For one thing, the animation for the video series was actually done by Han-Ho Hyung-up, whom a lot of you might recognize were doing the animation for such shows as Gummy Bears, the fourth season of The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, the original DuckTales, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, and many others. For another, a lot of characters that did appear in the radio series are completely absent from the video series. Heck, even Connie, who was a main character in the radio series, didn't appear in the video series until the 12th episode, A Stranger Among Us. And even then, she didn't appear very often in the video series as much as in the radio series, and there doesn't seem to be any reason why the staff behind the video series didn't include Connie until near the end of the video series' original run. In some ways, that's kind of similar to how the original Garfield strip ended up dropping Lyman in 1983, and he didn't appear again until finally reappearing years later in a multi-part episode of The Garfield Show, which actually gave an explanation for why Lyman didn't appear in the strip for years after that. although a lot of people find that explanation rather non-canon to the Garfield franchise. But back to Adventures in Odyssey. Another thing I did learn about the video series is that while the radio series is more grounded and down to earth in conveying its lessons, the video series is also somewhat grounded when teaching the lessons. But unlike the radio series, the video series actually made use of quite a jarring amount of slapstick comedy, which was not present at all in the radio series. I mean, yes, the radio series did have some humorous moments to balance out the tense and suspenseful, and even sad moments, but not even the radio series went as far as to have several characters, like Eugene or even Dylan, end up on the receiving end of what TV tropes refers to as amusing injuries. In fact, the slapstick comedy in the video series feels like that it could have been on par with that of Mr. Bogus or even the 1980s Garbage Pail Kids cartoon, but not quite as extravagant as that of those two shows. However, despite the overabundance of slapstick comedy in each episode of the video series, I actually enjoy the Adventures in Odyssey video series for the way that it captures the spirit of the radio series without being too preachy. In fact, the video series actually covers some pretty good morals, such as valuing family and friends over material possessions, loving our neighbors, taking responsibility for our actions, showing loyalty to our friends and loved ones, dealing with jealousy, honoring our siblings, keeping promises, and many more. These lessons really feel like that they fit in with the video series in addition to the radio series, in keeping with the Christian aspect of both versions. And even though the Adventures in Odyssey video series does differ from the radio series in various ways, I still think that's a pretty enjoyable direct-to-video series, even if it did also have to compete with other Christian direct-to-video series at the time, most notably VeggieTales and McGee and Me. But despite this, the video series isn't really all that bad for what it's going for being an adaptation of the radio series. Though a lot of people do seem to be really split on this version of Adventures in Odyssey. Some people liking it for bringing the main characters to animation and keeping with the spirit of the radio series, and others not liking it because of how they think the video series seems to rely too much on slapstick comedy just to try and keep the kiddies entertained. But whether or not the video version of Adventures in Odyssey uses slapstick comedy, it's still a good entertainment show, like a lot of other Christian series that were released at the time. If you like it, you like it, but if you don't, you don't. But as for me, I really do like it, so it's because of this that I will give Adventures in Odyssey 8.5 stars. Even though the radio series has started going downhill in recent years, mainly due to the death of several voice actors and the producers seemingly running out of episode ideas, at least a lot of people still enjoy listening to the classic episodes of the radio series. Though all I could say is, I just hope that the radio series doesn't start going the same route that other shows like Sesame Street, The Simpsons, South Park, SpongeBob SquarePants, and even Family Guy and American Dad did, and that the producers can decide to end the series when they feel that it's gone on long enough. I mean, yeah, it probably is best that the staff behind the video series decided to put an end to it before it could go on too long and end up falling into several pitfalls that VeggieTales did. Sometimes it's best to let a show get put out of its misery than to let it run longer and start overstaying its welcome, much like SpongeBob and The Simpsons. That can especially apply to Christian series, similar to what happened with VeggieTales, when that show also started going downhill starting in the mid to late 2000s, thanks to the box office bombs of Jonah, a VeggieTales movie, and The Pirates Who Don't Do Anything, a VeggieTales movie. Also, this may seem very unlikely, but if the video series could ever be brought back and revived, probably as a web series on YouTube or something, they could probably try to make it more in line with the radio series, while still bringing back characters like Dylan and his family, or even Sherman the dog. But I digress. Then again, shows that have been rebooted or revived have been a mixed bag, as I mentioned in some of my reviews. They can either be a good representation of the show that's based off of, or they can be absolutely terrible and lack the charm of the original. Most of the time, it ends up being the latter, but on a rare chance that the revival or reboot does live up to what made the original so great, they will likely gain a new audience, and I feel that might probably happen if a revival of the Adventures in Odyssey video series ever does come to pass. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. As before, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notification bell for more videos from me. So until next time, see you in the future!